Hello, fellow Rebel Capitals. Hope you're well. So, a 1 in a trillion event just happened. And if you're saying to yourself, oh, George, right, you're just making that up just for the title. This is clickbait. No, I'm sorry. You would be wrong. And I'm talking about what just happened in the FX market, which I think is a proxy for the fragility of the global monetary system. This is why it's so important to pay attention to things like the yield curve and all these other interest rates that are waving these red flags. And a lot of people sit there and say, oh, yeah, that stupid yield curve, that doesn't even matter. I mean, it inverted like 2 years ago, and the unemployment rate still at 4.2%. Like Jim Cramer, buy. What that fails to recognize is what the yield curve is telling you is the risk that's within the system. So if we do have some sort of, let's say, speed bump, then that impact of the speed bump is going to be exponentially greater to the downside. And what we just saw, I don't know how this plays out. This could be a long-term capital management. This could require bailouts of banks. We just don't know yet. So let's get right over to probably start with Market Watch. And then we're going to go over to Bloomberg. And I haven't looked, but I'm guessing Zero Hedge did an article on this as well, because it was quite literally an event that people thought was impossible. So, and usually when you have, I'm not saying this is going to be a GFC or anything like that, but usually when you have the start of something major, it usually begins with something that was a total black swan. And this would be the definition of black swan. This is the quintessential black swan. The only question is, what is the systemic risk, right? So let's start by going over to Market Watch. And here you go. Like I said, I'm not making this up. Title: The 1 in a trillion event tying the Taiwanese dollar, Trump trade policy, and AI. So, of course, they're trying to blame this on Trump and everything like that. But I mean, the mainstream, it's getting nauseating how much they're trying to just blame everything on Trump. Do I like the tariffs? No. But is every single thing that's happening in global macro a result of Trump's tariffs? No, of course not. Come on. But the main point here is 1 in a trillion event. So this is never supposed to happen. This is not just lightning strike. This is like a meteor hitting the earth, or this is like the same probability as the sun not coming up tomorrow. And what's the real kicker is what the central planners are blaming it on. Because although we don't know exactly what has happened, we do know it's major. What the central planners blame it on tells you everything you need to know about what didn't happen. Just bear with me. I'll show you what I'm talking about. So right now, let's actually go over to TradingView. Ah, darn it. You know, I had that up on my other computer, and I thought I had it up here, but I don't. So let's do USD versus, let's do TWD, and let's do TradingView. Okay. So just so you guys get the idea, the gravity of what's going on, look at the last 5 days. And this is how the currency typically trades. This is US dollar to Taiwanese dollar. And this is the dollar crashing. Literally, when people say, oh, the dollar's crashing and blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine. Not really. But this is actually the dollar crashing against the Taiwanese dollar. Absolutely. I'll be the first person to admit this is a crazy move. Again, 1 in a trillion, literally. That's not exaggerating. In fact, let's zoom out. And you can see that we have these types of up moves, down, but they happen over long periods of time. Look at this chart. It's just straight down. It's just plummet, just right off a cliff. And again, you do have bigger moves down, of course, but it's over long periods of time. It's over months. It doesn't happen in one day, for heaven's sakes, or just over a weekend. I mean, this is really, really crazy stuff. So anyway, getting back to the article, I just wanted to pull up that chart. We'll probably go back to it just so you guys get an idea of how rare this actually is. Let's do there you go. That really shows you the magnitude of what just happened. This is the 5-year chart. And I'm not exaggerating the chart. That's actually what it looks like. I mean, that's that's not even wet and wild. That's like straight down. At least wet and wild chart has a little bit of an angle to it. And I think it's even down just today. It probably closed at the lows. Yeah. Yeah, it looks like it closed right around the lows. It definitely didn't bounce, that's for sure. Okay, let's get back to Market Watch. So the first hypothesis they have is Taiwanese life insurers. So it's a very similar setup to Silicon Valley Bank, where and again, this is the theory, and there's several theories out there. But what the central planners do is they tell us what we should exclude from the list of possibilities. More on that in just a moment. So you guys remember what happened with Silicon Valley Bank? They had treasuries, let's say, yielding 2%. And I'm just throwing this out there for easy math. And then they had all these liabilities. And what happened is the liabilities were like, no, we're out of here. We want to transfer our money to JP Morgan. We want to transfer our money to Wells Fargo, Bank of America, whatever it was. And so they had to sell the assets in order to be able to transfer those deposit liabilities, right? So let's just say there's $1 million that some guy wants to transfer from his Silicon Valley Bank account over to JP Morgan. Okay, Silicon Valley Bank can take the $1 million deposit liability. It's a liability of the balance sheet. They send that over to JP Morgan, right? So now that client has the $1 million in his account at JP Morgan. That's a liability of JP Morgan. That's an asset of the individual client. But Silicon Valley Bank can't just send them a liability. That doesn't work. So they have to send them an asset, or JP Morgan has to extend them credit. And that's the offsetting asset on their balance sheet for that liability that was just transferred to them. So in Silicon Valley's bank, in that situation, in that example, the writing's on the wall. All the other banks saw what was happening to them. And they're like, hell no, we're not going to extend them credit. No chance. So they had to sell the treasuries on their balance sheet that they didn't want to sell, that they didn't think they'd have to sell. And they sold them at a big loss to the point where they're insolvent. So what we say there is they didn't hedge their interest rate risk on the asset side of their balance sheet, and they got caught with their pants down. And it's basically the first theory as to why the Taiwanese dollar had this 1 in a trillion event against the US dollar is because these Taiwanese life insurers got caught with their pants down as well. Same thing. They didn't hedge out their FX risk, because what they're doing is they have Taiwanese dollar liabilities, but then the assets on their balance sheet were US treasuries. So they have two forms of risk. In fact, it's even worse than Silicon Valley Bank, because Silicon Valley Bank didn't have the FX risk, because at least their liabilities and their assets were both denominated in dollars. So they just have the interest rate risk. But what's happening here is they've got the interest rate risk and they've got the FX risk. So, but this doesn't tell us everything that's going on, right? Because if the dollar goes down, then all of a sudden they have a harder time meeting those liabilities that are denominated in the local currency. So let's just assume for a moment that the value of their treasuries stays the same. Okay, if the dollar falls down, then the value of their treasuries denominated in their local currency goes down as well. All of a sudden, they're screwed because they can't meet their liabilities based on the asset side of the balance sheet when they make the conversion from US dollars to their local currency. Okay, I think you guys are following that. So now let's get back to what Market Watch is saying could be the reason. Again, no one really knows. We're going to have to see how this plays out over the rest of the week here to see if there's any systemic risk, or there obviously is. It's just a matter of, does the systemic risk have an impact that we see right away? So they go on to say it's a classic case of liability and asset mismatching that often leads to financial troubles. In this case, Taiwan life insurers over the years have put their assets into US dollar denominated bonds, i.e. treasuries, which was and even is not a terrible strategy, but they have done so without hedging the currency risk. Just like Silicon Valley Bank didn't hedge out their interest rate risk, they didn't hedge their FX risk. And wait till you hear why. This is just mind-blowing. Taiwan ranks as 10th largest holder of U.S. Treasury securities, $295 billion as of February, in addition to holding U.S. dollar-denominated corporate bonds. Okay, so it's corporate and treasuries, as well as agency securities, so Fannie, Freddie, mortgage-backed securities. They didn't hedge because it was expensive. They didn't hedge because it was expensive. Look, I almost flunked out of high school. I've never taken an econ class in my life. I've never taken a finance class. But even I am smart enough to know that if the insurance I want is extremely expensive, there's a reason why. And that reason is there's a high probability that what I'm trying to insure blows up. Right? Like, think about that. You probably have insurance on your car. So if you call up and you're buying a brand new car, let's say, and the insurance is sky high, what does that tell you about the probability that your car gets into a wreck or gets stolen? Or if it does get into a wreck, how expensive it is to fix? Well, the insurance rate pretty much tells you everything you need to know. And then if the insurance rate is nothing, let's say you call up, you buy a brand new Toyota or something like that, and like a Toyota Prius. I don't know if they still have those in the US, but let's say you get a new Toyota Prius, you call up and say, hey, what's the insurance? And they say it's $20 a month. Number one, you're going to be like, woohoo, awesome. But the fact that it's $20 a month tells you that there's a very low probability that gets stolen, and a very low probability that that it's expensive if you do get into a wreck, and probably a low probability that you as a driver get into a wreck, because anyone that buys a Prius probably isn't going to take it out to the racetrack on Friday night. They're probably not going to go down I-10 at 110 miles per hour, smoking weed and drunk off their ass. Probably not your typical Prius driver. Whereas if someone bought like a Ford 150 Lightning, I don't know if they still have those, but the guy, or if someone in 2025 bought like a 1992 IROC Z, what are the chances that guy's going to be going down the highway at 110 miles per hour, baked out of his mind? Probably 99.9%. A little bit different customer profile with a brand new Toyota Prius versus the 1992 IROC Z. So it's the exact same thing in the financial markets. So if you're that guy or gal that's running that pension fund, and it's like, wow, it sure is expensive to hedge out our FX risk, that in and of itself should be a huge red flag that you're doing something wrong, or you're doing something that's way too risky. Like, did you not see that? Like, you're like, oh, wow, that's really expensive. I have no idea why hedging out our balance sheet is expensive, but it is. So we're just not going to do it. I mean, it's like, who's managing these things? You really need a PhD in economics to do this. I mean, you need a degree from a fancy Ivy League school to manage an insurance fund or pension fund or whatever this is. I mean, really? It seems like you don't even need to graduate from third grade, from what I'm seeing. Unbelievable. They say they didn't hedge because it was expensive. Okay, then again, maybe you shouldn't put on the trade. Jeez. But they may, uh, another example, it's like buying a Ferrari. I've had some pretty fancy cars in my life. I've had a Ferrari. I owned it back in 2010, 11, or no, it was 12, 13, something like that. I had a Lamborghini before that. So I've had, the fancy Italian sports cars and all that stuff. I've had the German ones as well. And the English, I had a McLaren too. But my point is, if you go in there and buy a McLaren, or you're deciding whether or not to buy a McLaren, and you're like, okay, how much is an oil change? And they say, oh, it's $5,000. And you're like, what? $5,000? There's no way I can afford that. Okay, well, then you probably shouldn't buy a McLaren, should you? It's the exact same thing here. It's like, what? That hedge is expensive. We can't afford that. Okay, well, then you probably shouldn't have a mismatch with the liability side of your balance sheet and the asset side. And these are the smartest people in the room. These are the people that have the fancy degrees from Harvard and Yale and all that stuff. Wow. All right. Here's a quote from Hamin Lee. He is a senior macro strategist at Lombard Odier. Due to a confluence of factors, Taiwan's life insurance companies brought their FX hedging ratios close to the lowest level in 7 years just before Liberation Day. Oh, that was smart, because if there is ever a time when you should not have had a hedge, it should have been going into Liberation Day with Donald Trump, because that's predictable. Come on. More insanity. I mean, you get what you deserve, really. I mean, these guys deserve to go bust. I mean, I hate to say it, because if the insurance company goes bust, then there's a lot of average hoes, as I say on my video. It's not the average Joe, it's the average hoe in Taiwan. But there's a lot of average hoes that are going to get screwed. It's like, I'm sorry, but that's the way the free market works. If you have an asset, if your counterparty risk, in this case, the insurance company, if they mismanage their balance sheet, then you're going to take a haircut. You're not going to get your premium or whatever it is. And that's the way, unfortunately, that's the way it should work. Because moving forward, that means that more of the average hoes will be more cognizant over the counterparty risk that they're actually taking. But of course, you guys know how this story ends. I mean, they're obviously going to get a bailout if they need one. It's just, and then that just kicks the can further down the road. And that just means that they're going to take more and more risk. And then in the future, why on earth should anybody hedge? Like, seriously. But that's actually probably why they're not hedging. Let's be honest. They're probably not. I'm sitting there calling them stupid. And in reality, they're probably smart crazy like a fox, in the sense that they know they're going to get bailed out if they do go bust. So why even have a hedge? That's actually, now that I'm thinking it through out loud, that's probably what's going on here. So then getting back into the odds of this move in the Taiwanese dollar that we just saw, that's what led to a 19 sigma shock. I've never even heard of that. A 19 sigma shock. That means it exceeds the typical move by 19 standard deviations in a world where a 3 sigma event is very rare. Let me repeat. A 3 sigma event is very rare, and this was a 19 sigma event. Oh, in fact, I wasn't even using hyperbole with the title of the video. I'm actually understating it. Look at this. I didn't even read this part. It's much rarer than even 1 in a trillion. So it's, I don't know, what is it? 1 in 10 trillion? 1 in 100 trillion? The move was exacerbated by holidays. Oh, come on. Are we really? I'm surprised they don't blame it on the weather. The move was exacerbated by unusually cold weather in the winter that no one could have forecasted. That's always the go-to, right? And now here, remember at the top of the video, guys, when I was telling you that we might not be able to pinpoint exactly what it was and what caused this move, but we can definitely exclude one thing from the equation based on what the central planners are telling us. Right here, I'll show you. Taiwan's central bank issued a statement on Monday saying the surge in its currency was due to speculation. Of course it was. It's those damn speculators every single time. Man, if it wasn't for those stupid speculators, those pesky speculators, all of the central planners, central planning would work out perfectly. It's just, but they've got this great, they've got this great path forward, and they've figured out all the dials to turn. They've done all their econometric models, and it's just those stupid plebs in the real economy that are speculating, just ruining everything for us. That's what they always blame it on. So what this is, whenever you hear a central planner blame a blow up or whatever just happened in financial markets on speculators, this is just simply code for what really happened is one of our stupid policies that we enacted last year or 5 years ago or 10 years ago or whatever is now blowing up in our face. And it's an unintended consequence, obviously, of something we did as the government, but we can't take the blame for it. So the people that can take the blame is the unknown, unnamed speculator. It's like the boogeyman. Well, we didn't do it. It was that stupid boogeyman again. Well, who is the boogeyman? Can you actually point to them? Oh, no, they just live under your bed. Well, how come I've never seen them? Well, you can't, you have to be really smart like us. You have to have your master's degree from economics from Harvard to actually see the boogeyman. But trust us, he's there. He's there. And every single bad thing that happens, it's a lot like Trump and Biden. Literally every single thing that happens that's wrong in the economy is Biden's fault. And every good thing is Trump's fault. That's just stereotypical central planning. Everything that happens as far as blowups in the financial market, it's always the speculators. It's always Joe Biden's fault. And anything that's good that's happened, oh my gosh, well, that's a result of all of my cleverness as the governor or the president or the congressman or whatever, politician, you name them. And I'm not isolating Trump. I mean, obviously all of them do that. They all do that. When's the last time you heard a politician say, you know what? I effed up. I effed up. I thought this policy would be good, and I didn't realize that it would have knock-on effects, and I didn't realize that the unintended consequences would make it blatantly obvious that the cost benefit didn't make sense when I implemented the policy to begin with. I had good intentions, but it turned out that this was a really stupid policy, and I'm going to go ahead and retract it. When? Just tell me when is the last time you heard any politician on the left or right say something like that? Answer, never. They're never, ever going to do that. Which just goes to show you that they lie to you constantly. Because almost every single thing that we do see happen as far as these blowups is a result of the central planners and the politicians, the authoritarians. And so, again, whenever you see the word speculator or speculation, this is just code for central planners not wanting to admit that they screwed the pooch. So we can go ahead and cross that. One thing you can cross off the list that I guarantee you did not make this happen was speculators and speculation. But what that leads me to, what I lean there is, okay, what did the government do that either caused this or most likely contributed to this? There has to be something. Let's keep going. The central bank does not participate in the Taiwan U.S. Economic Trade Working Group, and the U.S. Treasury Department has not requested the appreciation of the new Taiwanese dollar. Okay, so I didn't read that before. There's my base case right there. Because number one, red flag is blaming it on speculators. Number two is when they have to come out and announce that this isn't what happened. Well, I don't know. Was anyone asking you? It's almost like what Barnes says all the time. It's like it's like a confession almost. Whenever they come out and say that this definitely was not it, you can almost guarantee that that's what it was. So, and I forgot how Barnes says that, but maybe you guys can remind me in the chat. He's got a very clever way of saying that. But regardless, the fact that they're coming out here and just overtly, explicitly saying, well, whatever you guys think, it definitely was not. It was not a result of a request from the U.S. Treasury Department to weaken the dollar against the Taiwanese dollar. But yet, go back and look at that chart. Look at that. You're telling me that that's just market forces right there? And that's not government, or that's not central bank intervention? Okay. I don't know that this was. Nobody knows really what happened, but let's just use some good old-fashioned common sense here. This is an event, I might remind you for the 100th time, that has a lower probability than 1 in 1 trillion. A lower probability than that. You've got the government coming out and blaming speculators, and you've got the government coming out and saying, well, whatever you do, don't even think that it had something to do with us talking to the U.S. Treasury and the U.S. Treasury wanting us to do that. The more I read this article, guys, the more this isn't just my base case. I would say the probability of government intervention right here is 80%. I mean, I just don't see how that could be a market move. Like, there's no way. Like a move from 33 to 32, that might be a market move, right? Maybe that's a result of the insurance companies being offsides and them having to buy hedges, and therefore they need to buy Taiwanese dollars, and that's what makes it appreciate. But this type of this does not pass the old sniff test, right? This is a market move, and it was just purely based on speculation or insurance companies being off sides. Right. This is two things here, in my view, and this is just me just giving you my opinion. It's not. I'm not saying that this is definitively what happened, but my opinion is the government did something. It probably made a situation fragile, or more fragile than it otherwise would be. And then you had the U.S. Treasury calling them up, and for whatever reason saying, hey, we want you guys to reduce the value of the dollar. I don't know. Who knows? I mean, semiconductor, I don't know. I'd have to think through what the rationale or the motivation could be on that for the United States. And then the central bank came out, they intervened at because the U.S. Treasury asked them to, for whatever reason, and they're trying to cozy up to the good cop because they don't want to be taken over by China. And so obviously Taiwan is going to do anything that the United States wants them to do, because basically that's their military force, or that's the military that they would have to back them up if China ever invaded Taiwan and tried to take them over. So basically you got Scott Bessent on the phone saying, hey, Taiwan, yeah, that military thing that we guaranteed you against China, yeah, that's actually we're maybe reconsidering. And what would help us make a decision is if you go ahead and devalue the dollar, or make your currency appreciate. Basically, almost like a Plaza Accord 2.0 with just the dollar and the Taiwanese dollar. So that would really help out in us deciding whether or not over the rest of the Trump administration, we want to back you up as far as from a military standpoint. So then, wink, wink. And so then this is what they do. And my guess is the Taiwanese central bank had no idea that it would lead to this, but they probably triggered it, and not understanding the government policies that made the system more fragile, and i.e. the balance sheets of the insurers. And then you just get to this move down, which is probably not what they intended. Let's keep reading here. The surge in demand for Taiwan's information communication products is a reference to companies including Taiwan Semiconductor manufacturing, the contract microchip manufacturer for companies including NVIDIA, which have thrived due to artificial intelligence demand. I don't know. I'm spitballing, guys. Maybe since most of the semiconductors are in Taiwan, they're being imported into the United States. Again, guys, I'm assuming this is how it works. So you've got your NVIDIA in the United States. They've decided to build a factory here. All these AI companies, they need these chips. They're bringing them in from Taiwan. Trump wants to build those chips in the United States as opposed to in Taiwan. So how do you do that? If the dollar plummets in value relative to the Taiwanese dollar, then that's going to make those semiconductor chips imported into the United States far more expensive in dollar terms. And therefore, that's going to act as a disincentive to bring them in, those chips, bring them in from Taiwan, and it's going to incentivize the creation of those chips in the United States. Because when you include the appreciation of the Taiwanese dollar, maybe, just maybe, it's less expensive to make them in the United States. That's just me right off the cuff thinking out loud as I'm live streaming here, because I did not give this any thought prior to the video. And I could be wrong. I could be seeing that in a way that's just not accurate. But those are my initial thoughts. Again, we'll have to see how this plays out. And if we do get some more information, I might refine that view. Media reports Mar-a-Lago Accord mentioned that United States conducted tariff negotiation with its trading partners. It may require rival countries to appreciate their currencies and convert to centennial bonds. The central bank said these are speculation. Oh, the central bank said, okay, these are, now next quote, these are all speculations by market participants. Okay, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, this does not pass the old sniff test here. Let's go on to Bloomberg, see if they've given us any other insights. Taiwan regulator summons life insurance as soaring currency bites. Skyrocketing local currency pile pressure hundreds of billions of dollars in U.S. bond investments. I think they're the fall guy. I mean, I think, were they probably off sides as far as the insurers? I'm guessing so, but I think they're the scapegoat here for a plan that was devised between the Taiwan Central Bank and Scott Bessent, U.S. Treasury. And if I had to guess, I'm thinking they wanted to devalue the dollar to incentivize chip production in the United States. That's my best guess so far, but let's keep reading here. The meetings are taking place Monday afternoon in Taipei. Central Bank Governor Yang Chen-long also held emergency media conference on Monday following the wild surge in the nation's currency. The central bank sought to quell speculation about the moves in the currency, saying the sharp two-day rally was partially due to market chatter. Oh, give me a break. Give me a break. So the 1 in 10 trillion event was just because of market chatter. Well, of course it was. Of course. Well, there you go. There you go. I mean, you guys watch my videos. You know how much that pisses me off. That is my pet peeve. When the central planners treat you like you're stupid. But that just goes to show you what the central planners actually do think of you. They think they are superior. They think you're inferior. And they think you're so idiotic. They think you're, as a whole, you dumb rubes out there in the real economy. You're so clueless that I can literally tell you anything, no matter how absurd it is, and you're going to buy it, hook, line, and sinker. That what they don't realize is we can see through the BS. And this is why so many people are pissed. This is why people are pissed off in the US. That's why people are pissed off all over the world at these central planners. It's because they've just been treated like children for so long in this condescending tone, in this condescending way. And the people are standing up and saying, you know what? We're a hell of a lot smarter than you think. And we can see through all of your garbage. We can see that this is total BS. And we can see that you're lying to us. And we're not going to take it anymore. He said dollar. So then they go back to the dollar hedges. I'm not saying that wasn't part of it. It probably was, but we're looking at everything that went into this. Obviously, it wasn't just one input. So if there's 10 inputs, okay, maybe the insurance companies being offside was one of those inputs. Maybe that had a 10% impact on the move. But I don't think this is too fishy. This is too suspicious. It's got all the red flags that you always see every single time that the central planners do something and they look for a scapegoat. This is part of their playbook. I mean, when you become a central planner, one of the first things they probably give you a gift pack with like a little book like this. It's like blaming speculators 101, or how to blame, how to blame the boogeyman for your screw up, and how to blame the boogeyman for what you're doing behind the scenes, trying to play puppeteer with the global economy and make it seem like you're just completely innocent. And even though you got your hand caught in the cookie jar. They said more insurers may be invited to meetings in coming days. I don't think, look, these meetings are just kabuki theater. I think they're just doing it because they think they have to, just to appease the public and the media, to just give them some sort of reasonable excuse as to what really happened, and just let the media run with it. I think plausible deniability, I think, is the term they use. And I want to be clear. I'm not saying this is absolutely for sure what happened, but my spidey senses when I'm reading this out loud are on high alert with this story, I can assure you. All right, guys, enjoy the rest of your afternoon. As always, make sure you're standing up for freedom, liberty, free market capitalism, and make sure that you check out Rebel Capitalists Live. We're getting close to the event here in a couple weeks. You can go to rebelcapitalistlive.com, check out the speakers. It's going to be a fantastic event. I'm sure we're going to be talking more about what's happening in the FX markets with the dollar interest rates, inflation, deflation. We got the Fed coming out tomorrow. What are they going to be doing? This is a global macro environment for the ages. And that's exactly what we're going to be going over at Rebel Capitalist Live. So you don't want to miss it. Again, get your tickets at rebelcapitalistlive.com. And I will see you on the next video.